You know, it's been a while since I read Holes. So you know what? Let's read it again, but let's do chapters 4 to 7. Okay? So, yes, this is the dumb intro. It's just that, I don't have intro maker anymore. I mean, Vlogstar, so I can't, you know. Okay, here we go. Stanley felt somewhat dazed as the guard unlocked his handcuff and led him off the bus. He'd been on the bus for over 8 hours. Be careful, the bus driver said as Stanley walked down the steps. Stanley wasn't sure if the bus driver meant for him to be careful going down the steps, or if he was telling him to be careful at Camp Green Lake. Oh, you guys see it in my face. Thanks for the ride, he said. His mouth was dry and his throat hurt. Yeah, like how my throat doesn't hurt. I was lying. He stepped onto the hard, dry dirt. There was a band of sweat around his wrists where the handcuff had been. Whereas, of course, that... Okay. The land was barren and desolate? What the heck is desolate? I don't know. He could see a few run-down buildings and some tents. Farther away, there was a cabinet beneath 2 tall trees. Those 2 trees were the only plant life he could see. They weren't even weeds. Why are there trees in Texas? The guard led Stanley to a small building. A sign on front said, "You are entering Camp Green Lake Juvenile Correctional Facility." Next to it was another sign which declared there was violation of the Texas Penal Code to bring guns, explosive weapons, drugs, or alcohol onto the premises. You know what? I'm just gonna close the door. I'm gonna close the door so I don't get interrupted. There we go. As Stanley read the sign, he couldn't help but think, well, duh. The guard led Stanley into the building, where he felt the welcome relief of air conditioning. A man was sitting with his feet up on a desk. He turned his head when Stanley and the guard entered, but otherwise didn't move. Even though he was inside, he wore sunglasses and a cowboy hat. He also held a can of soda, and the sight of it made Stanley even more aware of his own thirst. I love Coca-Cola. He waited while the bus guard gave the man some papers to sign. "That's a lot of sunflower seeds," the bus guard said. Stanley noticed a burlap sack filled with sunflower seeds on the floor next to the desk. "I quit smoking last month," said the man in the cowboy hat. He had a tattoo of a rattlesnake on his arm, and as he signed his name, the snake's rattle seemed to wiggle. "I used to smoke a pack a day. Now I eat a sack of these every week." The guard laughed. There must have been some small refrigerator behind his desk, because the man in the cowboy hat produced 2 more cans of soda. For a second, Stanley hoped that one might be for him, but the man gave one to the guard and said the other was for the driver. 9 hours here and 9 hours back, the guard grumbled. What a day. Stanley thought about the long, miserable bus ride and felt a little sorry for the guard and the bus driver. The man in the cowboy hat spit sunflower seed shells into a waste paper basket. I have a question. Who eats sunflower seeds? Well, then he walked around the desk to Stanley. "My name is Mr. Sir." He said. "Who the hell names himself Mr. Sir?" "Whenever you speak to me, you must call me by my name. Is that clear?" Stanley hesitated. Yes, Mr. Sir," he said, though he couldn't imagine that was really the man's name. "Yeah, me as well. You're not on the Girl Scout anymore," Mr. Sir said. Stanley had to remove his clothes in front of Mr. Sir, who made sure he wasn't hiding anything. "Mr. Sir, you're a weirdo. He has to cover with his clothes while he's naked." Well, I've seen the movie. I've seen the movie of this. He doesn't change naked. He was then given 2 sets of clothes and a towel. Each set consisted a long-sleeve orange jumpsuit, like a prison suit, an orange t-shirt, and yellow socks. Stanley wasn't sure if the socks had been yellow originally. He was also given the white sneakers, an orange cap, and a canteen made of heavy plastic, which unfortunately was empty. The cap had a piece of cloth sewn on the back of it for neck protection. Stanley got dressed. The clothes smelled like soap. Mr. Sir told him he should wear one set to work and and in one set for relaxation. Laundry was done every 3 days. On that day, his work clothes would be washed. Then the other set would become his work clothes, and he would get clean clothes to wear while resting. You ought to dig 1 hole each day, including Saturdays and Sundays. Each hole must be 5 feet deep and 5 feet across in every direction. It's been 5 minutes already? Wow. Your shovel is your measuring stick. Breakfast is served at 4:30. Stanley must have looked surprised because Mr. Sir went on to explain that they started early to avoid the hottest part of the day. No one's going to babysit you, he added. The longer it takes you to dig, the longer you'll be out of the sun. If you dig anything, you will report it to me or any other counselor. When you finish, the rest of the day is yours. Stanley nodded to show that he understood. This isn't a Girl Scouts camp, said Mr. Sir. I'm not going to do funny business now. I'm just going to read it. He checked Stanley's backpack and allowed them to keep it. Then he led Stanley outside into the blazing heat. Take a good look around you, Mr. said. What do you see? Stanley looked out across the vast wasteland. The air seemed thick with heat and dirt. Not much, he said. Then hastily added, Mr. Sir. Mr. Sir had laughed. You see any guard towers? No. How about an electric fence? No, Mr. Sir. There's no fence at all, is there? No, Mr. Sir. You want to run away? Mr. Sir asked him. Stanley looked back at him, unsure what he meant. If you want to run away, go ahead. Stop running. I'm not going to stop you. Stanley didn't know what kind of game Mr. Sir was playing. I see you looking at my gun. Don't worry. I'm not going to shoot you. He trapped his holster. This is for yellow-spotted lizards. I wouldn't waste a bullet on you. I'm not going to run away, Stanley said. Good thinking, said Mr. Sir. Nobody runs away from here. We don't need a fence. Know why? Because we got the only water for 100 miles. Away, you'll be buzzard food in 3 days. Stanley could see some kids dressed in orange and carrying shovels dragging themselves towards the tent. You thirsty? Asked Mr. Sir. Yes, Mr. Sir, Stanley said gratefully. Well, you better get used to it. You're going to be thirsty for the next 18 months. Or you'll die then. Chapter 6. I'm probably going to do chapter 5 and 6 and probably 7 and 8 another day. Oh wait, no, this is chapter 5, idiot. This is chapter 5. I'll do 4 and 5 and then 6 and 7 another day. There were 6 large grey tents, and each one had a black letter on it. A, B, C, D, E, or F. The first 5 tents were for the campers. The counselor slept in F. Stanley was assigned to D10. Mr. Pedansky was his counselor. My name is easy to remember, said Mr. Pedansky as he shook hands with... There was a bug on my arm. She shook hands with Stanley just outside the tent. 3 easy words. Pedansky. Oh, I don't have a pen here. Wait, so you mean pen? Dance? Key. Okay. Oh, yeah, I get it. Mr. Sir returned to the office. Mr. Pedansky was younger than Mr. Sir and not nearly as scary looking. The top of his head was shaved so close it was almost bald, but his face was covered in a thick, curly black beard. His nose was badly sunburned. Oh my god, this is a lot on. Mr. Sir isn't really so bad, said Mr. Pedansky. He's just been in a bad mood ever since he quit smoking. The person you got to worry about is the warden. There's really only one rule at Camp Green Lake. Don't upset the warden. Stanley nodded, as if he understood it. I want you to know, Stanley, that I respect you. Mr. Pedansky said, I understand you made some bad mistakes in your life. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But everyone makes mistakes. You may have done some bad things, but that doesn't mean you're a bad kid. Typically, Stanley got in there because he stole shoes that landed on his head. I've seen the movie, like I already said. Stanley nodded. It seemed pointless to try and tell his counselor that he was innocent. He figured that everyone probably said that. He didn't want Mr. Pedansky to think that he was in a bad attitude. I'm going to help you turn your life around, said his counselor, but you're going to help too. Can I count on your help? Yes, sir, Stanley said. Mr. Pedansky said, good, and patted Stanley on the back. 2 boys, each carrying a shovel, were coming across the campground. Mr. Pedansky called to them, Rex, Allen, I want you to come and say hello to Stanley. He's the newest member on the team." The boys glanced wearily at Stanley. They were dripping with sweat, and their faces were so dirty that it took Stanley a moment to notice that one kid was white and the other black. "What happened to Bag?" said the black kid. "Lewis is still in the hospital," said Mr. Bodansky. "He won't be returning." He told the boys to come shake Stanley's hand and introduce themselves like gentlemen. "Hi," the white kid grunted. "That's Alan," said Mr. Bodansky. "My name's not Alan," the boy said. "It's Squid, and that's X-Ray." "Hey," said X-Ray. He smiled and shook Stanley's hand. He wore glasses, but they were so dirty that Stanley wondered how he could see out of them. Mr. Bodansky told Alan to go to the rec hall and bring the other boys to meet Stanley. Then he led him inside the tent. There were 7 cots, each one less than 2 feet from the one next to it. "Which was Lewis's cot?" Mr. Bodansky said. "Bag slept here," said Mr. X-Ray, kicking out one of the beds. "All right, Stanley, that'll be yours," said Mr. Bodansky. Stanley looked at the cot and nodded. He wasn't particularly thrilled about sleeping in the same cot that had been used by someone named Bag. 7 crates were stacked in 2 piles to one side of the tent. Then the open end of the crates faced outward. Stanley put his backpack, change of clothes, and towel in what used to be Bag's crate. It was at the bottom of the stack that had 3 in it. Squid returned with 4 other boys. The first 3 were introduced by Mr. Bodansky as Jose, Theodore, and Ricky. They called themselves Magnet, Armpit, and Zigzag. "They all have nicknames," explained Mr. Bodansky. "However, I prefer to use the names their parents gave them. The names that society will recognize them by when they return to become useful, hard-working members of society." "Ain't just a nickname," X-Ray told Mr. Bodansky. He tapped the rim of his glasses. "I can see inside you, Mom. You got a big fat heart." The last boy either didn't name or else he didn't have a nickname. Both Mr. Bodansky and X-Ray called him Zero. "You know why his name's Zero?" asked Mr. Bodansky. "Because there's nothing inside his head." He smiled and playfully shook Zero's shoulder. Zero said nothing. "And that's Mom," a boy said. Mr. Bodansky smiled at him. "If it makes you feel better to call me Mom, Theodore, go ahead and call me Mom." He turned to Stanley. "If you have questions, Theodore will help you. You got that, Theodore?" "And depend on." Theodore spit a thin line of saliva between his teeth, causing some of the other boys to complain about the need to keep their home scented. "You all were new here once, Mr. Bodansky, and you all know what it feels like. I'm counting on every one of you to help Stanley." Stanley looked at the ground. Mr. Bodansky left the tent. Soon the other boys began to fight out as well, taking their towels and change of clothes with them. Stanley was relieved to be left alone, but he was so thirsty he thought he could die if he didn't get something to drink soon. "Hey, Theodore," he said, going after him. "Do you know where I can fill my canteen?" Theodore whirled and grabbed Stanley by his collar. "My name's not Theodore," he said. "It's Armpit." He threw Stanley to the ground. Stanley stared at him, terrified. "There's a water spigot on the wall of the shower stall." "Thanks, Armpit," said Stanley, as he watched the boy turn and walked away. He couldn't for the life of him figure out why anyone wanted to be called Armpit. In a way, it made him feel a little better about having to sleep in a cot that had been used by somebody named Bag. Maybe it was a term of respect. Okay, that's gonna wrap it up. Wow, it's almost 14 minutes. Yeah, goodbye.